Welcome to Falcons Drip, your go-to source for Falcons news and draft coverage. I'm Thon, founder and voice of Falcons Drip. Today, I'm again joined by Jeff and Ferg. We're going to take a look at the wide receiver position in our continuation of positional breakdowns of this roster. We're going to look at who's on the team, who we think is going to continue to be on the team, and kind of the impact that everybody is going to have at the wide receiver position. So, Jeff, how are we doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm sitting a little closer to Ferg than normal, and I'm not sure that I like that, but other than that, I'm doing pretty good.
How's he smelling?
Not the best.
I smell better than you do.
So, Ferg, how about you? How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing okay, except I'm sitting closer to Jeff than I would care to.
Well,
so
maybe you should remember your charging cords next time.
So here's what happened. Just so everyone knows, here's what happened. Jeff forgot his computer again, and he's plugged into my computer, and I've had to just save the day once again.
So before you two, you old married couple get into it, let's jump into receivers because we got a lot to talk about and not as much time as we need. So I want to start with Calvin Ridley. And we don't have to jump too much in Calvin Ridley. He's the bona fide one. He's the guy. He's the receiving guy in this offense. I expect him to even have better numbers this year. You look at last year, he could do it without Julio Jones. His numbers were better when Julio Jones wasn't there. And now we actually have an offensive coordinator that's going to be able to mix things up, and you're not going to know what's coming, if it's going to be a run or a pass, where Dirk Cutter last year, you knew that we were passing the ball 90% of the time. So I'm looking forward to what Calvin Ridley can do. Anything about Calvin you guys feel like we should mention before we kind of dive into some of these other guys?
Yeah, he's definitely the number one. He's not going to play necessarily the traditional number one receiver slot, which I think will have an impact on the rest of our discussions tonight. But he's going to be the number one in every other sense of the word.
So I want to jump into to what you said, Jeff, is when you look at receivers, you've got typically your X position, your Z position, and then your Y position. Your X is usually your bona fide guy, so like your Julio Jones, your DeAndre Hopkins, your guy is solo. Typically your X is the solo receiver by himself to one side. He's up on the line of scrimmage. The most important thing about that guy is his ability to kind of get off of press, because corners can come up and jam you and press you. And if you can't get off press, you can't play the X. Now, kind of like what you said, is I'm not saying Calvin Ridley can't play the X, but he was so good at Z. So Z, is you're on the other side and you've got the tight end up on the line, and the Z is off the line of scrimmage. So you've got like a couple yards or a yard to play with to get by the guy. So if you don't need to worry as much about being pressed. But Calvin was so good at the Z position, I would not want to switch him. He's a number one receiver in the NFL. He's naturally a Z. He's a little bit smaller. I'm not saying he can't get off the press.
Question.
Yes.
Is there anyone else on the roster that could do what he does at the X position?
Yes. Do what Calvin Ridley can do at the X?
Yes. Or even relatively close in production.
So we're definitely going to get into that. I don't know. But what I don't want to see this. We have a bona fide one at the Z, like a bona fide one receiver in the NFL. He's a top 10 guy in my opinion, and he has potential to be, like I said, in this new offense.
That's what I meant. I meant the Z, not the X.
Okay, so right. No one can do what he can do at the Z.
Got it.
This whole X, Y, and Z kind of really owns this discussion today. Why is that? So the Y is your slot guy. He's off the line of scrimmage. Has an in or an out break kind of a thing, typically gets matched up with smaller corners, linebackers, those kinds of things. Now, our number two receiver is Russell Gage. Russell Gage thrived in the slot last year, and Arthur Smith came out and said that he's going to try him at X, try Russell Gage at X and see where he can play, and he's really like the number two guy. But if Russell Gage cannot play that X position and cannot get off of a jam, it puts this whole thing in a little bit of a pickle. So why is that? Because now you're going to have to rely on one of these other receivers to play that X position, And Russell Gage might not even be the second receiver out if he's not in the slot.
Right. And you're going to be putting somebody who is relatively inexperienced in that X position, and they're going to be going up against top-tier defensive backs, and they're going to have a rough time most likely.
Definitely. So when you sit here and you look at this roster, and we talked about this a little bit before, the three of us have, it's a mess. And Russell Gage really determines, in my opinion, Russell Gage determines who makes the roster and who doesn't because of his ability to play the X or the Y. So, Olamide Zaccheaus, OZ, can play. He's the next best receiver in my opinion.
I think it's Zaccheaus.
However you say it, OZ, he's the next best receiver in my opinion.
He runs a 4.2, right?
No, he actually ran pretty slow. I think he ran actually high 4.4 or low 4.5.
My
mistake. His game speed is so much faster, and
it looks radically different.
He's quick. He's quick in and out of his breaks. I think his first touchdown was like a 92-yard touchdown catch. So,
Could take the top off the defense.
Definitely, but he can't. He's a slot guy. He's not going to be able to. He's not going to be able to get off the press. So, if we got Gage at the X, then OZ is the slot receiver, and I don't think there's much of a discussion after that.
He's been fairly successful with the Falcons so far.
Mm-hmm.
That's really where he can play. Like you said, he can't really play outside. He's had snaps outside, but they really haven't been productive snaps in general.
And if he did play outside, it would probably have to be at the Z.
Right.
But if Calvin Ridley's playing, that's where he is.
Yeah.
So, now, you take Russell Gage out of the equation at X. Let's say he can't do it. He struggles, get off press, and he has to play in the slot. Now, we're looking at a slew of guys competing for that X position. We've got Tajay Sharp, Christian Blake, Frank Darby, Jeff Badette, and someone who I think actually could really compete for that X position is Juwan Green. So let's kind of jump into that. Let's jump into that situation. Let's say Russell Gage is the slot guy, can't play X. What do we see this X position looking like?
Well, you mentioned some of the guys up for it. You have to think that's part of why they brought in Tajay Sharp, bigger guy. I mean, he's by far the biggest wide receiver on the roster right now. I think he's got 3 inches on everyone else, 6'4", and those guys, you hope that they can beat the press because they're bigger, harder to jam. He's played in the NFL a few years, had some success in Tennessee as a starter, but went to Minnesota. He's been in the league for a while for a reason. So,
and this is my problem with, and all of there's no sure thing here. Tajay Sharp very well could be the X, but here's my problem with Tajay Sharp, and I actually don't know if he's even going to make the roster. One, he is definitely brings something different than the rest of the guys, the biggest guy by far. But when he was doing well in Tennessee, most of the time it was from the slot, I believe. And he didn't do as well when he was playing the X position.
No, he did. He had trouble separating.
He had trouble separating. He had trouble beating the press, which is kind of like the biggest thing about playing the X. Now, he also didn't. He played last year. He was playing for the Chiefs and I think the Vikings.
He was on the Vikings for sure.
The Vikings and Chiefs, and so he was inactive for most of the year. For 10 games, he was inactive, I believe, and then for 9 games he was inactive. For 7 games, he was active. I think it was like 5 for the Chiefs and 2 for the Vikings, but never played in either of those games.
Yeah.
So that shows right there that not only is he, bottom of the barrel kind of a receiver as far as being active, but he also doesn't contribute on special teams.
Yeah.
And there's too much importance on special teams with this team, and too many of these guys can play special teams that I would not be shocked to see Tajay Sharp not on the roster come September 12th.
I have to say, in regards to Tajay Sharp, I'm going to piggyback off of what Jeff said, and that's he has something that no one else has on the team. And not on the team, at the receiver position, and that's size, right? Aside from Tyler Pitts, who we may see bump out and play
Kyle
some
Pitts.
receiver. Sorry, Kyle Pitts.
A lot of names getting tossed around.
Well, exactly. It's easy mistake to make. Everyone knows Kyle Pitts was the number 4 overall draft pick, so it's just twisted up my words there. But he's got something that no one else has. So that's certainly a big reason for them to keep him on the roster.
When you look at this, right? When you look at this whole thing, and we have to talk about Cordell Patterson and the tight ends, because with the skill set that we have, there's no reason why we couldn't expect to see Patterson or Pitts or even Hayden Hurst could all play that X position.
Certainly, it's a deep spot. I agree.
So,
I have one thing.
Yeah,
I don't think Cordell Patterson's playing the X.
So
at a effective level for the same.
Unlikely, but as we've mentioned in a previous podcast, at 6'2", 240, and he's got 4.4 speed, maybe he can make something happen out there.
Possibility.
Maybe you just throw him out there as somebody you have to respect the speed.
Yeah.
So I have a hard time thinking Tajay Sharp with his little special teams value makes the team.
Makes sense.
And when we're talking about, we've mentioned before, we think they're just going to be 4 running backs on the roster, 4 tight ends on the roster, and a fullback.
Yeah,
so
it seems like with this coaching staff, I just want to add something here. Compatibility is paramount in that they have a system, and they want guys that can fill behind in that system who aren't remarkably different than whomever was starting ahead of them, right? That seems to be of greater importance than having a guy who's 6'4", can potentially, you can spread him out and get the ball to him and in the red zone.
So definitely, and when you look at this exposition, the next guy that I'm going to talk about is Frank Darby. We drafted him. One of the things he does best is beat the press. I have a hard time thinking that a 6th-round pick is going to come in and make an immediate impact. Like in my mind, Frank Darby is towards the end of this year, next year, kind of gets his stuff together, but he's going to make the team. They're not, they drafted him. It's a weaker position. He can play on special teams. But his ability to beat the press and in OTAs, everybody was talking about Frank Darby. He was making ridiculous catches. He was getting open. He was beating guys. If he can keep that up, and I'm going to say Frank Darby is who I think is going to end up playing that X position more than any of the other receivers.
You think he gets a lot of touches this year?
I don't know if he gets a lot of touches because there's so many mouths to feed.
Looks,
but I think he gets.
Right.
I think he gets as much playing time after Gage and Ridley. I think he gets as much playing time as any of the other wide receivers on this roster. But
he's got more upside.
He definitely has more upside. He is more. He's going to be around for longer than a lot of these guys. And I could be wrong. This exposition, this receiving core after Ridley and Gage is a mishmash.
Well, very much of what we're saying is mishmash. It's very much so speculative, and so I think we're putting the pieces together based on the coaching staff, the current leadership and what they like, what they want to see. Frank Darby makes sense.
And like I said too, Tajay Sharp is bigger than Darby, but when I've talked about Darby in the past, he plays big.
Right. Like you said, he plays big, and that's something you definitely saw in college for Frank Darby. I think there's a lot of varying opinions on Frank Darby, whether or not he was a good route runner. His how he caught the ball. He was a body catcher. A lot of people want to see him catch with his hands. Get his hands out in front, close the window for the DBs to make a play on the ball. But I think he ran great routes. I do. I think Frank Darby ran great routes, and he's definitely more compatible for this system. There's no question, which is greatly important.
Mm-hmm.
Of great importance.
Anything about Darby, Jeff, that you'd like to add? I know.
I think he just has a lot of room to grow,
Mm-hmm.
and the potential's there. A well-liked kid in college by his teammates and coaches. Hearing the same thing here about him in Atlanta. So hopefully that he just continues to grow. And like Ferg said, the body catching could sometimes be a little bit of a fallback, it looked like in college. And from what I've heard, he's been doing a better job of staying away from that in camp. So, if he's trying to make football his life, he's going to have to grow, and he has the opportunity to really get some playing time. So we'll see from him.
Where do you look at, like, looking at Tajay Sharp versus Darby? Like, what do you think their outcome will be?
I think, like you said, Darby's making the team almost definitely. Like, he'd really have to have a bad camp to not make it. Sharp has a lot less guarantees, and he really hasn't separated himself in the NFL yet. Like I said, he did have some starting time in Tennessee and got good reps there, but really didn't show that, I'm an NFL starter. So this might be his last shot.
In my opinion, in order for Sharp to make the team, he has to lock down that X position to the point where it's like, okay, like, this is our X.
How long has he been in the league?
I believe this is 6-7 years.
Oh, wow. Okay, so his career is winding down.
I'm not necessarily winding down, but he needs to show that he can stay in the NFL.
He's shown flashes of greatness at times, but overall been pretty mediocre to a bottom of the roster kind of.
Well, and so let me elaborate. I say his career is winding down. I say that with grace because he's starting to get pushed around. And that's typically a telltale sign when guys begin to get pushed around. They don't spend a lot of time in one place.
So
it's towards the end of their career.
Because I know what you mean, but just to clarify, by pushed around, he means like getting moved from team to team, not actually getting pushed around by the
right, not physically being pushed around on the field or anything like that. Exactly.
I knew what you meant, but I just wanted to clarify for people who might
certainly.
not understand.
I have a hard time getting away from that prototypical wide receiver, and that's what he he's a big guy, right? And he's someone that you'd like to be able to perform, make an impact, because unfortunately, size is something you can't teach. Right? Frank Darby is what he is. He's what, 5'10", 5'11"?
He's 6 foot, 200 pounds, but at any rate.
I was close.
Yeah.
I mean, still, 5'10", 5'11", 6 foot, it's like it's not much of a difference there. 5'11",
so
6.
Like, but it just
my point is, though,
that's
not 6'4".
Definitely. Definitely not.
There's a reason that once you hit like 6'2", it's something like 14% of the world's population is over 6 foot, and then you get to 6'2", and it's like 8%. You know what I mean? It's like each inch you go up after 6 feet. My point is, in athletics, taller guys, they're more sought after, right? And if you can match the height, if you can match your size with talent and skill, so I'd always like to see, or I always want to see guys like that worked with, just because there's so much. Anytime you're 6'4" and you're playing receiver, there's so much untapped potential. There just is. It's a matter of, do you want to work for it? Do you have the, are you willing to learn? Are you willing to, be brought under someone's
tutelage?
There you go. Right. Exactly.
One of the other guys we haven't talked about much about possibly playing the X is Christian Blake. And I know, Jeff, you really like Christian.
I like Christian Blake. He's shown flashes of being a very fluid wide receiver. He's 6'1", a little thinner at 180 maybe to consistently beat some of the jamming guys. It would be interesting to see him get some reps at the role and see if he could do see what he brought to it. He had a great game against the Saints and last year, and like I said, he's shown flashes. He was just kind of buried on the depth chart last year.
So, and another thing I really like about Blake is he's shown he can play special teams in the past. Not at an elite level, but he's played all the special teams, different positions. He can play every single position at receiver, X, Y, Z. And I think that versatility is going to be what keeps him on the roster.
That helps for sure.
Because now, if you look at this roster, so when you look at it, everyone is so limited. Not so limited, but a lot of the receivers we're talking about are limited on where they can play. And Christian Blake, so if somebody goes down, Christian Blake can play, like I said, all 3 positions plus special teams. I think it just gives them a huge advantage. Fun fact, Christian Blake and Calvin Ridley actually played on the same Pop Warner team growing up.
Wow. Where was that? I'm curious.
Florida, I believe.
I love knowing that kind of stuff.
That must have been no fun for the other team.
I wonder where they played on the field.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Right? Like, was
Like
one
if they both played receiver or
Exactly. I doubt it. I doubt it at that level. You know what I mean? I bet you one was a running back and the other was
quarterback or
a
something.
quarterback or something. Exactly, yeah.
There's 2 other guys competing for that X in my mind. And we talked about things you can't teach with Tajay Sharp being 6'4", and that's Jeff Bedet. Do you guys know if I'm saying that? Jeff Bedet.
Oh, it's French. I'm pretty sure it's a French last name, yeah.
So Jeff,
Yeah.
I'm just going to call him Jeff. He's got 4.2 speed. There isn't a single guy, I don't think, on this roster that has 4.2 speed. The problem with Jeff is he struggled to make a roster. Like they wanted to use him in special teams in Minnesota, who had a weak receiving core, and he just didn't make the team.
See, that's a guy though. I'm so glad you bring that up. It's a guy like we were just saying, things you cannot teach. 4.2 speed. You've got to figure out a way to get that guy the ball. You just have to. Is he quick laterally?
So I haven't seen a ton of him. He looks pretty quick.
Yeah.
But more straight line speed than anything else.
Okay, because like Tyreek Hill has incredible straight line speed and incredible lateral speed and agility.
I would say his lateral speed and agility is better than his straight line speed.
It just doesn't even make sense, right? But my point is, if he has both, or if he's halfway deep, he obviously has good straight line speed, obviously. But if he has, if you can couple that with, good lateral speed, I'd like to know more about that. If he was good, Jeff, do you know?
It's hard. There's not. We haven't seen anything of him at the NFL level. You have to think it's not where it needs to be. Generally, if he's not making the roster and you have 4.2 speed, Al Davis isn't handing out free contracts for that anymore. So it's you gotta be a complete receiver. You can't just be fast. You got to be able to, like you said, have lateral quickness and stuff like that. So you got to think he hasn't put it all together if he's not making a roster when he has something that most people don't have.
Well, I think the wide receiver position, that might be the wrong position for him.
Maybe, but I don't know.
Well, we don't have track and field here, so
yeah, I was going to say I don't know what other position he could play.
Special teams.
That's one of the things that they tried to get him to play, and he struggled with. I shouldn't say struggled with. He wasn't good enough to make a roster yet on special teams. Hold on.
Okay, you said that earlier. My mistake.
No,
I heard that, and it didn't. I didn't digest it.
The 4.2 speed was just taking.
It just exactly. Yeah. It was like
which
blinders.
He might, strict. This is how this whole receiving corps is. If he can show enough on special teams with that 4.2 speed, and Arthur Smith thinks he can do something with it.
The guy's he's got to be an idiot. How do you have 4.2 speed and not produce? Like, how can you not find a spot?
There's tons of guys that don't make it with the speed.
I just don't get that.
You can't, you got to be tough. You got to have speed. You got to beat the press. You got to have vision. There's so many things.
And you got to catch the ball.
Exactly.
So
I want to jump to my next guy. I'm talking about this X position and being a complete receiver, and that guy could be Juwan Green. Now, I have Juwan Green a lock for the practice squad because if you see what he did, he played at Albany, which is a D1AA school, but he dominated at Albany. We're talking about 1,300 yards, 17 touchdowns in his final year, and he looked like he could do no wrong. You don't always want to take guys at a D1AA level. You have to do what he did in order to kind of trust to become a good player, if that makes sense. He's 6 foot, 190 pounds. So, and you just don't know what you're going to get with him. It's hard to find a lot of tape besides his senior year. It's hard to find what he ran his 40 time in. There was not a rumor. It was said going around that he was hand timed 4.3. Do you remember what it was?
No. I don't remember what it was.
I think it was I want to say he was hand timed 4.35. Hand time, so we don't really know what we're getting here. The reality is with Juwan Green, he did enough for me to say in college he did enough for me to say, okay, maybe this guy could do something, because the last regime signed him, and then after Arthur Smith came back, he brought him back to stay in Atlanta. So that's why I say he's a lock for the practice squad. For a minimum, he might need a couple more years to kind of develop into something, and there's something there if Arthur's bringing him back.
Yeah, he played against, like you said, some of the lower level competition, but he dominated, and he showed really great body control, like adjusting to the balls in the air and adjusting around the corners, setting up corners so that he could make easier catches. Like, he really did a very good job at those things, and maybe he just needs an adjustment period to the level of competition.
Definitely. And he dominated against the press, too. Like, I don't know if you watched a lot of his film. Like, they could not press him. Again, we're talking about D1AA, so it's almost like 2 jumps to the NFL versus just like 1.
Yeah.
But he is the potential to be something. So that's why I gotta keep him on my list of guys that could become the X receiver. I would say, in my mind, I think he would probably need another year, but I like him more than I like Tajay Sharp.
Yeah, because there's the room for growth is there. With Sharp, you kind of know what you're getting, and that's a reliable catcher who doesn't always separate, and so there's a reason he's still in the NFL, but he's fighting for a spot because we know what he is, and Green presents a lot of options. I see him, down lower on that tier. I think Darby and Blake have better chances at taking that role overall than Green.
I think, if not this year, I think next year, Juwan Green is going to surprise some people.
How many years in does he have?
So this is his second year. So last year was his rookie year, undrafted free agent in Atlanta, like I said, and then after the first year, Arthur Smith comes in and decides to re-sign him back to Atlanta. So, like I said, there's got to be something there.
Yeah.
So we've kind of talked about who we think is going to make, like, guys who are like fighting to make the roster and guys who are going to make the roster. Let's talk about some of these practice squad guys. So I want to start with Chris Rowland. I really like Chris Rowland, but I have a hard time seeing him make the roster and even making a practice squad spot this year.
It's tough. He's a smaller guy. Was a good college player at a smaller college, Tennessee State. But this is, we are just getting to talking about him. It's tough. And there's already smaller receivers in front of him. You got Gage, like we said. You have Zacchaeus, who were.
I don't see how, like, he seems kind of like he's 5'6". I think he's almost strictly a slot receiver at this point. And we talk about the versatility, we talk about that kind of stuff. The only way Chris Rowland makes this team, in my opinion, which I hate to say because, like I said, I really like him, is he has to take the punt return job or kick return job.
Which the kick return job is almost definitely locked up because you have one of the best kick returners of all time on the roster in Patterson. So chances of taking that are almost zero.
Slim. So it's going to come down to Chris Rowland or Avery Williams, who we drafted in the 5th round this year.
For the punt return job, you mean?
Yeah, we drafted him for special teams.
And you can't even, like, another receiver on there is Austin Trammell, who did a fantastic job in punt return. Like, there's a lot of guys fighting for that punt returner spot.
And I really like Trammell. I really liked what I saw from him out of Rice, and his numbers are good too. I mean, he was a little slow on the 40. He ran a 4.6, but he had a 40 at 5'11". He had a 40-inch vertical.
Yeah, and he's just
explosive.
made plays. He wasn't like necessarily the fastest, but he got open, made plays, did a great job in the punt return game for Rice.
We're talking about a guy who's more shifty than fast. So then we also didn't talk about Antonio Nunn, who, he's a kind of like a stockier build in some of these receivers. 5'11", 205, I believe.
Yeah, he's another guy who's going to have a tough time. Like, all these guys are fighting for kind of a 5th spot, and they're similar players, and And that's if they're fighting for it. I mean, they might be 6th, 7th.
So,
really.
Yeah. So when I look at these guys we've just kind of mentioned, I like Nunn and I like Trammell for practice squad guys. I think they both could potentially grow into something bigger, but they're not ready right now. I mean, Nunn at 5'11", 205, potential, and he's pretty fast. I mean, pretty fast. I think he ran a 4.4.
He's a little older for a rookie, though.
Yeah,
24 years old. The worry is, when you get rookies, there's some more development time. Then you get to 24, 25, maybe you have something. The worry is he already kind of there? Was he older in college, and that was what made him successful?
Mm-hmm. That's very true. But like when you look at a lot of other things that he could work on, like dropping the ball, a lot of like poor route running, like that's stuff you can learn.
Yeah.
So you hope that he can, pick up on some of those things. And like I said, at 5'11", 205, runs a 4.4. You hope that he can do more on special teams than some of these other guys. It's different.
You hope so.
Even if he's not returning, like being a gunner or blocking on special teams, it's a lot different for him than like Chris Rowland, who, again, I really like, but it's a lot harder at 5'6", 180 pounds to do some of these other things besides return the ball.
Right.
Which is why I like Nunn better than
Rowland. And the same feeling with Trammell, or?
I like Trammell more. So this is where it's so tough. I think Nunn has greater upside, but Trammell is safer.
Yeah, I could see where you're going. I
think Nunn could possibly do more in the future, or Trammell I think I don't know if he can play the X.
Trammell can't play the X.
Well, he definitely can't right now, but
I don't know that he ever can.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, what can he do then? What can we do with Trammell?
He's a slot receiver.
He's a slot receiver and possibly the Z. But when you look at it, like Russell Gage is on the final year of his contract, and he might play this year. He might play himself right out of Atlanta. Like Atlanta, the way this offense is going to run, we talked about Kyle Pitts and the running backs and the matchups in that way. We don't need receivers, and we're going to have to pay Calvin Ridley probably a decent amount. We can't afford to pay Calvin Ridley and pay somebody else.
Sure.
So it's possible we talk, like looking at all these guys, Zacchaeus, Trammell, possibly even Rowland, Juwan Green, and Nunn. These guys maybe not next year, but the following year could end up being a starter for us.
Somebody's gonna have to may need to take the slot position, and Zacchaeus is the lead for it, but he still has to show that for a new coaching staff. He's fighting for his job too.
Mm-hmm. So, is there anybody that we've kind of went over? I know we went over these guys a lot quicker than most, but we had a lot of guys to talk about. Is there any of these guys you feel like we didn't discuss something or something else we got to bring up?
No, I think the receiver position it's really difficult to make a determination at this point. As it is with other positions as well, but more so the receiver position, because we have so many guys that frankly just don't stand out. I mean, that's a negative way of looking at it. We have so many guys, I should have said, that are so close together and that skill wise, right? It's hard to see who the front runner is going to be, right?
And it's almost like, who do you see possibly, with a lot of these young guys, who do you possibly see being a guy that could impact the team in the future?
Well, we need to see the system play out before, and that's why I say it's just too early to make a determination, because we need to see the system play out. Once we see the system play out, I mean, even after, I'd say like week 2, we'll have a much better idea of who we're going to see, even if none of them play. So my point is, if none of the guys that we just discussed play,
they could very well at the end of this offseason, they could very well go sign somebody and
absolutely,
like, you're the X.
Well, that's my point exactly. Right. I think we're all on the same page, and it's just, you said in the beginning, it's a mosh pit. It's very hard to suss out, what exactly is going to happen.
Yeah, and one thing we didn't talk about that I think will be interesting to see is, I think you're going to see Darby and Zacchaeus get some chances to catch some bombs this year.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be some play action. Those guys are going to be flying down the field. And I hope we can see them catch some real nice deep passes, some nice deep touchdowns, 60, 70-yard touchdowns we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping to see.
Yeah.
Because that is a mixture that Smith likes to throw in there a couple times a game that I don't know that we saw as much of the past couple of years in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm. So I think, just kind of like piggybacking off what you said, I think we saw more deep passes than we're going to see this year, but less like designed trick deep passes, if that makes any sense. Like, I think a lot of Calvin Ridley's routes last year were, deep posts, corners, deep comebacks, deep digs, which is like an in route. And I think we're going to see a lot more like slants from Calvin Ridley and a lot more, quick outs and seeing what he does after the catch than what we saw last year.
Yeah, I think he's going to have a mixture. And then the deep balls will be the designed deep streaks. Like, it's going to be, if
fake
defense makes one wrong misstep,
mm-hmm.
we're talking 50, 60-yard touchdowns. We're not talking 30-yard
Mm-hmm.
post. We're talking big
Definitely.
bombs. And I think Matt Ryan will have fun doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be good to see.
So now when we look at this roster, guys, I just want to kind of go over what we think this is going to look like, because it is a mishmash. Now, when I look at it, we've got Calvin Ridley and Russell Gage for sure making the team. Then you've got Frank Darby for sure. Ridley and Gage are for sure making the team and contributing. And then you've got Frank Darby, who is for sure making the team, and I'm going to give him a 95% chance to make the team.
That sounds accurate.
And if he doesn't make the team, he's for sure going on the practice squad.
Yeah.
And then my next two making the actual team, because I think they're only going to carry 5 wide because of the versatility of the running back and tight end. They're going to have Zacchaeus and Christian Blake are going to be the next two, in my opinion, due to Zacchaeus being the next most talented after Ridley and Gage, and Blake being able to play, like we said, everything and be an asset on special teams.
That's the way I would like to see it go. Like I said, I like Blake. I really hope he makes the roster. I think he has the skills to contribute, and so I would love to see him make the roster.
Now, that being said, we're talking about the practice squad. I think Juwan Green is a lock for the practice squad. I think he's too talented and has too much potential for us to let him go.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. Like I said earlier, like, great body control, extremely productive. He just needs some more time.
I'd really like to see him get some play time. I really would. And Thon, I know you said that Juwan will definitely make the practice squad. He's not going to make the roster or whatever, but
I mean, like, he could. I really think he could.
Sure. I want to see him play. I want to see him play at the professional level, right? Because as you said, you're going from D1 AA to the NFL. It's a huge jump. But then again, I don't know anything about Albany's program. I don't know how good Albany is. As we said in our last podcast, UCF, University of Central Florida, that was a D1 AA school back in 2010, 2011. They're ranked every year now. Mm-hmm. So my point is, I don't know. Albany could be this team that you look at the roster and it's like, oh yeah, they've sent 10 guys in the last 10 years to the NFL. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. They haven't sent a ton of guys, and I also I didn't watch most of the games, but I did notice when I was watching Juwan Green's highlight tape. It seemed like Albany was usually losing.
Okay.
So but that like being said, like, even on a team where you're you're mostly losing, everyone's focus was on Juwan Green. You know what I mean? Like, other teams were like, all right, we got to stop this guy, and they couldn't.
Okay, so Juwan Green, I get what you're saying. He was the focus.
Yeah.
On both teams, both sides.
It's like when I'm trying to think of a situation. It's like the Bears, their offense is terrible, and you have to try and stop Allen Robinson.
Sure.
Everybody knows Allen Robinson's the guy, and you got to try and stop him, and you can't. So that's kind of similar, obviously on a scale down, but that's what Juwan Green was like on Albany.
Okay.
So with Juwan Green making a lock, I shouldn't say a lock. I would say Juwan Green is 90% on the practice squad. I'm going to say 85% on the practice squad, 10% on the roster, 5% not on the team next year.
Interesting.
I like him a lot. I really do.
I'm wondering if he's the only guy that makes the practice squad.
Because he could be. So
from the wide receiver position, because we've talked about running backs making it, some tight ends making it. I don't know that they're as worried about the receiver position and developing them for the future.
Yeah.
Let me add something here. The real issue, I think, in a lot of our analysis has been that we have so many athletes. And I'm saying labeled athletes, not just like Pitts. He was drafted as a tight end, but he is also considered an athlete, someone that is versatile, like multidimensional. So when I'm saying that we have so many athletes, we have so many multidimensional players, it's very difficult to suss, like I said before, to suss out what's going to happen, because you have a lot of guys at the tight end position who could play receiver, who could play fullback. And this isn't just, they could, well, maybe. No, maybe they have in the past, right? It's happened in the past, or it's been projected by others than just ourselves. So that's what I'm referring to. So many multi-dimensional players. That's a much more specific way of putting it. Multi-dimensional players.
And when you talk about Pitts, like, I would not be shocked if he lines up at X more than anybody else.
Well, exactly.
And also, too, like, with two tight ends, you can go two tight ends on either side of the line of scrimmage.
Right.
And now instead of having an X and a Z, you basically have two Zs.
There you
know
go.
What I mean? So that could eliminate some of those problems. So it's just going to be...
In the coaching staff, the new coaching staff, a new coaching staff coupled with a surplus of multidimensional players, it's almost frivolous trying to anticipate who's going to play where.
Definitely. So we are starting to run out of time. Anybody else you think makes this practice squad? I know Juwan Green. I wouldn't be shocked if they kept one more wide receiver. And I could even see it because, with the new practice squad rules, you can't keep you can keep 6 guys who have played for more than 3 years. So I don't think they would give that to Tajay Sharp. I think if anything, they would give it to Jeff Bidet, just for his speed and hoping that they can develop something by the end of the year.
Sure.
But if they don't give it to him, it's going to, in my opinion, it's going to go to Noon or Trammell.
I don't know if there's enough room. It's just,
well,
as previously discussed, there's so many guys. You've got at the receiver position, at the running back position, the tight end position, those 3 specifically on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're bringing 11 guys into the camp so they can make the decision. I think this is going to be a tougher route to the practice squad. I think they want to use other positions in the practice squad. There's only going to be probably one guy, in my opinion, that makes it. And these 6 guys, I would say, that are going to be fighting for it are really going to have to prove it, because 5 of the guys, in my opinion, are going home.
Mm-hmm. And, we could see 6 guys go home and see them if nobody turns out, they could grab somebody off waivers before the season starts. So
Definitely.
Today we broke down the wide receivers, which I think was one of the harder position groups to do, just because of all the competition for that wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2 spot, and all the different players and things that they bring to the table. So next week we will continue this for the next episode, and we'll look at the offensive line. Again, this is Thon Ray. You guys can follow us at Falcons_drip on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Please make sure you subscribe, follow, whatever you need to do to get the alert for our next episode. If you guys enjoyed today, please leave us a review. It always helps us grow. Until then, see you next time. Rise up.